Hello, my name is Frank Christensen and I'm the coordinator of officials for IFAF in Europe. This is the third of 6 training tapes dealing with false start. Today we're specifically looking at false start on the offensive line, so the interior line. And we're looking at how much is too much and what does it look like when these big guys typically false start. We'll look at the mechanics of how to catch it and the philosophy behind who should call it and how should it be called. But before we get to the game film, let's have a look at the rulebook and the MOFO to see what they have to say on this topic.
In the rulebook, we go to Rule 712 dealing with false start. Each of the following is a false start by Team A if it occurs prior to the snap, after the ball is ready for play and all players are in scrimmage formation. 1. Any movement by one or more players that simulates the start of a play. 2. The snapper moving to another position. And 3. A restricted lineman according to Rule 227.4, moving his hand or making any quick movement. As for the exceptions, 1. A. It is not a false start if a Team A lineman immediately reacts when threatened by a Team B player in the neutral zone. B. It is not a false start if the snapper takes his hand off the ball, provided this does not simulate the start of a play. And then 4. It is also a false start when an offensive player makes a quick, jerky movement before the snap, included but not limited to A. A lineman moving his foot, shoulder, arm, body, or neck in a quick, jerky motion in any direction. B. The snapper shifting or moving the ball, moving his thumb or fingers, flexing his elbows, jerking his head, or dipping his shoulders or buttocks. C. The quarterback making any quick, jerky movement that simulates the beginning of a play. And D. A back simulating receiving the ball by making any quick, jerky movement that simulates the beginning of the play. And finally, 5. The offensive team never coming to a 1-second stop prior to the snap after the ball is ready for play. This is an illegal shift that converts to a false start. In the MOFO, we go to section 3.2 definitions. Examples of conspicuous fouls that should be called, even though they might otherwise be disregarded as not serious, include F. False starts by a back, tight end, or receiver. In section 3.3 non-contact fouls, false start says, movement by an offensive player is not a false start unless either 1. He moves one or both feet, 2. It is sudden, or 3. It causes a defensive player to move in reaction. If a running back misses the snap count, makes a sudden movement, and then stops abruptly, it is a false start. If he was generally going into motion, he wouldn't stop. And finally, if in doubt as to whether movement was prior to the snap or not, it was not. Don't be picky on this. Now, let's have a look at some game film. In this first clip, we're looking at the guard closest to the camera, and it's not a violent move. It's not a big flinch or anything, but just leaning back like this is a simulating the start of the play, and this is a false start that we need to call, and this ideally should be called by either the umpire, since he's focused on the guards and the center, or the line of scrimmage official, the line judge here at the bottom of the screen. Either one of those or both of these officials could and should call this. On this play, we're looking at the tackle closest to the camera, and while the last one was more of a lean, this is a typical flinch where he needs to get into pass protection, which is why he's flinching backwards. But this certainly is big enough that we need to call this. We need to shut this down very quickly, and correctly called by the wing here at the bottom. And I like the fact that, when there's only one flag, which is typical on a tackle like this, the wing can go straight into a prelim and just relay the number, and we can move on with the announcement and the next play. On this play, we're looking at the guard closest to the camera, and we certainly could also talk about the legality of this formation, but for the purposes of this training tape, we're just talking about this guard and the way that he wants to pull, and he just gets out a little early, starts leaning back there, and again, this is not a flinch or an abrupt movement, but it is something that we need to call, and it's correctly called by this umpire, should also be called by the line judge here at the bottom of the screen. So this one is an interesting situation. We're looking at the guard away from the camera, and he's going to do a little butt flinch there, typically when it's a guard, we want the umpire and the wing on that side to be looking at it. This move would be very difficult to see for the wing, since the butt there is covered up by the tackle, and from the point of view of the umpire, he's looking from the front there, and that would also be very difficult for him to move. Now this is a flinch that we need to call, so this is big enough for a call, but this is one of those unusual situations where we can get help from the referee or center judge. Now we wouldn't want them to be focused on the line of scrimmage to the degree where they would miss flinches by the quarterback or the running back. But that being said, this is one of those situations where they certainly could, if their focus is drawn to that flinch, to that move, where they could be asked to help out with a play like this or a call like this, simply because it would be so difficult for the primary officials to see it. On this play, we're looking at the closest guard, or the guard closest to the camera, and this is a good example of a situation where it's really important to have sound pre-snap routine with your whistle. So here the guard moves just a fraction of a second before the snap, but this is enough for a false start. But it's also a situation where the ball is snapped and we have action in the box that we want to shut down. So if we have to start looking for our whistles and picking it out, the action is allowed to continue for way too long. On the other hand, if we're quick on the whistle, you notice here the referee or the umpire has his whistle in his mouth so that he's ready to blow and throw, and do that very quickly. He does that very well here. Then we can shut it down as quickly as we possibly can and avoid too much stuff going on in the middle. So again, correctly called for a false start, correct by the umpire, should also be called by this line judge here at the bottom of the screen. But well done to shut this down very quickly as we can. This next one is on the tackle closest to the camera here, and he does this little flinch right there, which is certainly enough for a false start, and correctly called by this line judge at the bottom of the screen. He does a good job of shutting everything down. Now it's also called by the center judge, and if you're back there as a center judge or a referee and this happens in your field of vision, it's not wrong to call it. Just make sure that your focus is not so much on the line of scrimmage that you end up missing stuff that happens in the backfield where your primary responsibility is with the quarterback and the running back. Also, now that we have two flags, we have to have this mandatory conversation between the two officials just to make sure that both officials have the same foul, which, we run the risk of this taking a little longer and hurting game flow and the speed of our penalty enforcement. On this last play, we have a somewhat unusual situation with the guard closest to the camera. It's not really an abrupt movement or anything like that, but he turns around, he picks up himself a little bit, and he's nowhere near close to the snap of the ball. And I mean, you could argue that this is not simulating the start of the play, but he is nowhere near. And we would just have a terrible situation. Let's say we let this go because it doesn't fit the typical standard false start, and then the offense scores a touchdown, and now we have to explain to the defensive coach why this wasn't shut down. It's just so much easier for us and for game management to shut this down as a false start, and so we don't have a play. We just have a 5-yard penalty, and everybody could see, well, 78 wasn't ready and he was moving around, so we go with a 5-yard penalty and move on with life. And that just, to me, is a much better solution. Again, this could or should be called by the wing here at the bottom, and the umpire, who should be able to see this movement and see this just looks weird and messy is a good way to describe it. And that was the training tape for false starts on the O-line. I hope it made sense, and I hope you found something you can use on the field.